Okay, good evening, everybody. I think we're going to get started. My name is Kathy Heintel. I think I've met everybody. I'm on the Board of Education and Facilities Chair. Gary Sides and Melissa Merrill are also here, the Chair and Vice Chair of the Board of Education. We have a bunch of staff members here as well. I want to thank everybody for agreeing to do this process. It's the first meeting of the Student Realignment Citizens Advisory Committee, and we're happy to see you all here. I'm going to turn it over now to Matt Cropper. As you remember, we engaged Mr. Cropper, Dr. McKibben, and Dr. Faust to help us with this process, as well as a capacity and student enrollment forecast. So thanks very much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over now.
Thank you, Ms. Heinzel.
Welcome to it.
And thank you all for coming. It's really, really appreciative to have you all volunteer to be here and be here for the course of the next several months. Before we get started, I think what would be good is if we could just, this is the first time a lot of you have met each other, if we could just start and have everybody introduce themselves. I'll start. My name is Matthew Cropper. I'm with Cropper GIS Consulting, and we work with school districts all over the country. I'll talk a little bit about myself in the PowerPoint. But if we can get started, we'll start with you, and then we could work our way around. And just tell us your name and where you're from and how you're affiliated with the school district and the county.
My name is Mary Moore. I have a rising freshman. Sorry, I keep forgetting. Mary Moore. I have a rising freshman at Forest Hills, and I have a daughter at Union Elementary.
Yeah, I guess I need to remember that. My past life. Reverend Jimmy H. Benson Sr. I'm the proud parent of 4 that have graduated from Monroe High School. I know I only look 15, but yes, I have 4 that have graduated. 2 of them went on to go to Chapel Hill, and 2 others are Marines. So we're real proud of where we come from as far as the Monroe cluster is concerned. I do ministry, and my tent making is real estate with RE/MAX.
My name is Glenna Bianchin. I have a student at Stallings Elementary. He'll be 5th, and then I also have a daughter at Porter Ridge Middle, so Porter Ridge cluster.
My name is Amy Erb. I am a teacher at Stallings Elementary, and I also have a rising 2nd grader there, and also representing the Porter Ridge cluster.
My name is Jen Averill. I've got 11th grader at CATA and an 8th grader at Monroe Middle, and I'm representing the Monroe cluster.
All right.
My name is Mary Zarowski, and I'm with Weddington, and I have a rising 7th grader and a rising 10th grader, both boys.
I'm Michael LaShaw. I have 4 boys, 2 at Cuthbertson Middle School, 1 at Newtown Elementary, and a 2-year-old. So,
Todd Price. I have 2 daughters at Piedmont High School.
My name is Chad Whitley. I own Buffalo Creek Investments in Marshville. I have 2 students. One just graduated from Forest Hills, is now a freshman at UNC Charlotte. And the other one is a rising senior at Forest Hills High School.
Hi, I'm Claudia Sandoval. I'm representing the Marvin cluster and have twin girls who are rising 9th graders, and I also have a 4-year-old son.
Hi, I'm Heather Pugh. I'm from Stallings, and I have a rising senior at Piedmont and a rising 7th grader at Piedmont.
My name is David Willis. I have 2 boys, 4th and 5th grade at Marvin Elementary in the Mandarin program, and a 2-year-old little girl who will be there in a few years. So,
I'm Eric Sherman. I have a 7-year-old daughter, rising 2nd grader at Antioch Elementary, and a rising 6th grader at Weddington Elementary.
My name is Patricia Kowalski, and I'm representing Parkwood cluster. I have 3 boys, 1 at Western Union, 1 at Parkwood Middle, and 1 that's going to be going to CATA.
Hi, I'm Sarah May, representing Sun Valley, and I have a rising junior at CATA.
So as you can see, we have a wide array of members on this committee. The committee, and I'll talk a little bit about it here in a second, but you were selected because of where the area you live and the area that you work and shop in and such. And really what we want with this committee is for you to give us your perspectives on the areas that you live in. And I know it's very difficult to do because you have children in the system and you have a tie to your individual areas. But as you sit around this table, what I encourage the committee to do is take off the parent hat and put on the committee hat and focus on, as we start to work through options, which we're not going to be getting into options tonight, but as we start to work through options, to focus on what's best for all children in this entire county and not necessarily what's best for the area that you live in. And but hopefully we can come to some conclusions at the result of all this process that works best for everybody as a whole, knowing that students are going to probably move and that that there's a likelihood that you're not going to make everybody happy. But we're doing this with a process that works and is proven, and it's open and transparent. So just a little bit about us. We are, go ahead. We are McKibben Demographic Research and Cropper GIS Consulting. We are K-12 planners. We work with school districts all over the country, everywhere from 2,000 to 200,000 students. I have with me Dr. McKibben in the back. He is our demographer, our lead demographer. And then also Dr. Faust is here as well. And you'll be seeing both of them throughout the course of the meetings and such, and they may help provide some help with presentations. But we specialize in demographic analysis, school redistricting and realignment, and K-12 facility planning. So as Ms. Heintel said, part of our work in this county is to preface this realignment study, is to develop a demographic study, a 10-year population and enrollment forecast, and a capacity study. And we'll be sharing that with you at the next meeting. We worked with districts all over the U.S., lots of districts in North Carolina and mainly on the East Coast. And we really bring a perspective of what has worked and what hasn't worked with other school districts. We bring a lot of technology expertise and things to help facilitate your decision making and make sure it's efficient and accurate. And then finally, what we bring is objectivity, because we don't have any children in the school system. I have an 10, 12, and 13-year-old at home, but they're not here and they're not in the school system, so I don't have any bias. And we're here to provide complete objectivity and help keep you on task with the things that we have to do. Dr. McKibben is part of our team, a PhD demographer. He's one of the best in the business at small area forecasting. He is finalizing his enrollment forecast, which we will be sharing with you. So we're not only going to be looking at what the students that live in the district right now, but also have the ability to look at what's going to happen the next 10 years, so we can be a little bit proactive and make sure that we're not only short thinking for this year or for the next couple years, but looking 10 years down the road as well. I have over 20 years experience in doing this work and work all over the U.S. I also do work with the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights and help them with consultation related to school desegregation cases and things like that. But just have really bring to the table a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge of how these processes work and how they've worked across the U.S. A little bit of background, and I apologize for any of you that came last night. We had a public information session last night, and it was a good meeting. Some of this may be redundant, but I know there's some committee members that weren't there, so I'd like to go over this. So we are here because the school district is experiencing changes in enrollment as well as infrastructure to the county. There have been charters added the past several years that have created an impact. It caused an impact on enrollment and created some imbalances in utilization. Also, there is a planned bypass that they've already broken ground and working on it as we speak, and that's going to bypass for Independence. I'm sure you all are aware of that, and that's something that could have and will have an impact on settlement patterns and migration and those types of things. In addition to some of those, the school district is planning to add classrooms to several schools throughout the county. Those classrooms are going to be plan to be implemented in the 2019-20 school year. So we are going to be looking at those additions and adding those into the capacity so that we can account for the planned additions and planned capacity that's being added to the schools throughout the county. And you can see here that there's an elementary school, Western Union, one middle, and then several high schools have some substantial additions that are being planned for those schools. In addition to the new construction, the school board wants us to look at focus on a neighborhood school concept. So really look at the boundaries and the students in the schools, and try to look at assigning students closest to their home if at all possible. And that's something that we can certainly look at and something that we will focus on. So in order to accomplish this, we have recommended a process. It's a community-based process. The best way to do this is to have it be as open and transparent as possible, so that everybody can follow the process, even if you're not sitting around the table here. So all of the meetings that we have are being live streamed, and those meetings are going to be recorded and saved, so that at a later time you can go on to the web page that we have dedicated for this process and look at the meetings and follow the process. Everything's going to be posted online, so the goal is to let everybody know what's going on here and to inform as many people as possible. We are focused on developing options that best meet the UCPS realignment criteria, and I'll talk a little about the criteria, but those are the rules to follow that you have to focus on when we start to evaluate the viability of moving a line one way or the other. The question you always have to ask yourself is, does making this adjustment bring us closer to adhering to the criteria? And if so, it's something that you should consider. If it's an adjustment that's founded on passion or something other than the facts and the data, and it takes you further away from the criteria, then it may be something that you as a committee do not want to consider. Full implementation of the elementary, middle, and high school boundaries will be fall 2019 to coincide with those classroom additions, so that we can make sure that we plan for those additions with the focus of only moving students once if they have to move. There will be some implementation in 2018-19, very likely. So what our focus as a group, or your focus as a committee, is to develop a plan for 2019-20, but a lot of that could potentially be implemented in the 2018-19 school year. Potentially a big majority of the plan could be implemented in 18-19. It all depends on what we see and how the process unfolds. So we have done several, we're hired to do several things here, to develop some supporting materials. As I said, we're doing a 10-year enrollment forecast and a school capacity study. And we'll bring you some more details on that in the next month. And we have finalized those, and we just need to get those all finalized and presented to the board before we share them with the committee. We are here to facilitate a community-based process to develop a student realignment plan, empower the community throughout the process so that the public is really a part of this. This is not just, you are just one part of this process, and it extends to the public, and the public is invited to participate. They're welcome to come to observe these meetings, and I'm sure as options start to unfold and as the process starts to mature, these chairs in the back are probably going to start filling up a lot more, and so the public is certainly welcome to observe but not participate at these particular meetings. And then we're here also, as I said, to leverage our expertise to help you through this process. So regarding student alignment criteria, the school district school board has approved a set of criteria to follow when evaluating the student realignment options. And these are really the rules to follow when you're considering boundary options or zone options. And these are to maximize busing efficiencies in transportation of students. So look at transportation efficiency, and that aligns with proximity and things like that to the school. Establish clear feeder patterns and continuity. So this is to try to, if at all possible, feed elementaries entirely into a middle, and then a middle school entirely into a high school. Sometimes you run into an issue where we solve imbalances at the elementary level, but now what we have, if it all goes into a middle school, it's going to create an imbalance at the middle school. Sometimes there may need to be a split of an elementary to a middle or a middle to a high. If that has to occur, it's best to have it be a more balanced split. Like if the split has to occur in a perfect world, it would be a 50-50 split. So that thinking of children when they're migrating from elementary to middle school, you want to make sure that as those kids go to the next level, they have some familiar faces, friends and things like that, and bonds that they made at the elementary level that can carry on to the next level. We want to try to avoid 90% of an elementary or middle going to one school and only 10% or 5% splintering off to another, because then you start to run into that risk of those children or the students are going to be really going to the next level not knowing many people at all. And it's a tough transition as they go from level to level. Balance of school facility utilization. So that certainly is something that's important to make sure that utilization is equitable across the school district. Account for future growth. So this is looking at, like I said, population and enrollment forecast and seeing what's not only what could solve some of the imbalances and things and accomplish our objectives right now, but be mindful of what's to come in the next 10 years to be able to be more proactive. So if a school is forecasted to decline in enrollment, you may be able to put a few more students into that school because it's anticipated to lose some enrollment in the next 10 years. Likewise, if a school is forecasted to grow, you may want to take a little bit, not utilize them as heavily so that you can be proactive and they can actually grow, expand, and not get overcrowded when growth does occur. Allow for grandfathering, which is something that's more of a policy-based decision. It's something that really is not in the hands of the committee. That's nothing that we can really control in terms of options development. It doesn't impact the way that we're creating options, but it is something that the school board is considering and has discussed. Grandfathering policy, which is to try to lessen the impact on students who are already at, say, a high school and they get rezoned, to try to minimize the impact of students that have to move from to another school in the midst of their tenure at that school. Minimize the impact on students. So in any option, we will be giving you some data that says the number of students that would be impacted in any particular option so that you can track the number of students that are impacted and be mindful of that. Make every effort to establish contiguous zones. So this is try to avoid creating what we call satellite zones. Try to have one boundary per school, and you'll see in some school districts there'll be one boundary around a school, but then there may be a small boundary that picks up a neighborhood that buses them to that school. That's something that we often get called in to help get rid of those types of things that school districts have made. And that's something we certainly want to avoid here and not create any satellite zones, and make sure that there's one boundary per school. Use major roads and natural boundaries wherever feasible to define attendance zones. So the best zone is one that you can describe verbally. If your neighbor says, "Okay, what does this zone? What's the zone for this school look like?" And you can say, "Well, it goes up this highway, down this major road, goes down along the railroad, and then across the river." Those types of things are some of a really efficient zone, and it also aligns with safety of students, trying to minimize the number of students that have to cross over major roads, whether it's walking or even riding in a school bus across dangerous intersections and things like that. And one thing that's important with these criteria is that all criteria are in no particular order of priority. So the best plan is going to be one that touches on all these criteria as best as possible. If you focus solely on one criteria, you start to really get far away from some of the other criteria. So Really, the best plan is one that when you, after you look at it, you say, yeah, you go evaluate the option and say that really touches on all these, improves or maintains the effectiveness of the boundary. And so don't focus on any particular criteria as a whole, but focus on all of them. Think of them all in one basket, and if the best plan is one that addresses and touches on all of those criteria. So we're breaking this down, and we've broken this down into 4 phases, and give you a little background on it. Collected data to start, and we've been doing this for the past couple of months. Collected data from the school district. We had your enrollment data, and we have all of the students mapped out so that we know where every single student in the district lives, and we can count students on any particular street or subdivision or neighborhood and find out how many students live there and what grade levels they are. We've also obtained information on the current boundaries in the schools and a lot of other information from the district. The county has given us a lot of good information on base data, so we have where all the municipalities are, the subdivisions. We know where the property lines are, so that when we start to draw boundaries, we don't draw a boundary through the middle of a property, and so then that property owner doesn't know, well, my front yard goes to this school, my backyard goes to that school, so that it's very definitive on where you go to school. The U.S. Census Bureau is a good source for population housing data, and we're using that for our demographic study and demographic analysis, and as well as the IRS data. The IRS reports county level in and out migration data, which is helpful for us to understand how many people are coming into the county and what's the household size. They report the income and where they're coming from, what county they're coming from, and it also reports where they're going to and what the people who are leaving the county, where they're going and what their household size and income is. And that again helps the demographers understand the impact on migration. You see when you live in this county, you see a lot of houses going up, construction and new subdivisions and things like that. And you're always thinking, well, there's all this growth and this and that. And it's true, there is growth going on. But one of the things that's hard to quantify and hard to understand is how many people are leaving the county and what in the out migration. And it's that net migration that really helps understand what the real growth is or the impact of change over the next 10 years. So we are, as I said, doing a population enrollment study and a capacity study. And by the next meeting, we'll have some things to share with you, school capacity numbers for each building, enrollment forecasts for all the schools, as well as what the utilization is, the percent full of the buildings, and what that looks like in the next 10 years. This is something that's very important, and really one of the focuses of our meeting tonight are planning blocks. So this is just a snapshot of planning blocks. You can see that the black and white dashed outlines, and what they are we take the elementary attendance areas and we overlay the middle and high schools, and we make a cut there. So there are a couple of feeder patterns that are split in the district, and that creates a couple of small blocks. Then we take that even further down at the elementary level and break it into small pieces and building blocks. And really the focus of these are to try to not split communities, try to keep communities intact, but it's a method to empower you guys with the ability, in the public, with the ability to understand if I move this area to this school, how many students would it be and what would be the impact? So within each of these planning blocks, you'll see there's a planning block ID number, and then there's the number below that. And we have maps in here that show the elementary, middle, and high school zones, and on each map it has the planning blocks with the ID, and then on the elementary map it shows the total number of K through 5th graders that live in each planning block. In the middle school map, the number of 6th through 8th graders, and then the high school map, the number of 9th through 12th graders. And that kind of gives you an idea, once we start looking at options and bringing some options to you to start to look at and dissect, you can have an idea, well, I don't like this boundary, or I don't like the utilization of this school. If I move this area over here, you can understand how many students it would be, and it really helps empower you with the ability to look at developing options and looking at the impact of making moves without having to have a full-on GIS expert, somebody with a lot of expertise in mapping. This is just another example, and one of our exercises, our final exercise tonight, we're going to break you up into small groups, 3 groups, and we're going to have you guys look at these on plot maps, and we're going to give you markers to evaluate the blocks and to see what you think, if you have any initial thoughts about the planning blocks, if there's a planning block that splits a community or a neighborhood, or if there's a planning block that could be divided further, or if it needs to be aligned or adjusted in any way, just to get your initial reaction of the planning blocks. You're going to see these a lot because we'll be working with them at every single meeting through the course of the study. And so it's not to say that planning blocks can't be adjusted later. When you start to see options come out, we can make other adjustments to the blocks. But this is just a first pass at looking at creating the planning blocks. I think there's over 200 planning blocks in the county that we have drafted for your review. Everybody should have a binder in front of them, and this is you'll notice it's 3 inches big, the binder, but there's only about a ½ inch of paper in it right now. So as we start this process and as every meeting unfolds, we'll be giving you more materials, and by the time the process is over, this binder will probably be relatively full. But you'll see that at the front of your binder is what we call a background report. And this is just some of the initial information that we're sharing with you. It gives an overview of the process and the criteria and our key objectives and a lot of good information. The timeline is on page 4 and a lot of good information. And then there's as well as maps in the back. You'll also see there are tabs that we have given you, and in the first tab we have the agenda, and then we also have the an exercise that we're going to do tonight. So you can, as you start to get these materials, we'll give you handouts with 3-hole punch, and you can just make sure you bring your binders with you and to keep your materials organized. But the purpose of this material, the background report, is to really expand the knowledge of each member and to have each committee member share the message that's consistent and accurate. The most important part of this process is not to speculate. Don't guess or assume what you think is going to happen, because we've done this 100 times, and there's always sort of curves in the road and changes and things that happen that you can't anticipate. So when you're talking to your neighbors, don't assume anything. The outcome of any particular option or anything like that. It's best to always refer to the background report. If they ask about information on capacity and so on and so forth, as we provide information to you, you can reference this. This is also going to be posted online. There's a web page dedicated to the process, and so that any member of the public can follow the process, print off these materials, get their own binders, and we see it all the time. Committee members or public members come and they'll have their binders and they're following the process just like an extension of the committee, and that's a great thing. As I said, some key pieces here are the key objectives, the criteria on pages 1 and 2, roles and responsibilities on page 3, and the timeline on page 4. And then we'll the back has some appendices, which I'll talk a little bit about. There's something that we call a Live Attend matrix, and this is something piece of data that's in your background report. It's at the end of the map series. I think it's near the end of your background report, but it's something that you can study. I always am fascinated by these when we work in districts, but this kind of gives you an idea on where students live versus attend school. So when you look at this, you can see this is the high school matrix. This shows the schools at the top, the number of students that live in each school zone. This shows the same list of schools, and this shows the number of students that are enrolled in the school. So what you can see are, when you start to go across, you can see the number of students that live and attend. The green column that you see in a diagonal are the students that live and attend in their home zone. So for Cuthbertson, for instance, there's 1,397 students that live in Cuthbertson that attend Cuthbertson. But there are 85 students that attend Cuthbertson that live in Parkwood. And 33 live in Sun Valley, but they attend Cuthbertson. So you can look at it both ways. For instance, Monroe has 1,458 students living in the zone, and you could track it downwards. 16 go to Forest Hills. 6 of those students that live in Monroe, high schoolers, go to Cuthbertson, and so on and so forth. And we have the specialty schools down here as well, the schools that on the bottom, these are schools that do not have an attendance boundary per se. There are maps included in here, and you'll see the background colors represent the boundary or the zone for the school. And then one thing to always to do when you look at maps, and people are really familiar with maps these days, but take a look at the title and see what the title tells you exactly what's being represented in the map. And the legend will tell you a lot of information, such as the dashed outlines. What does that show? And in this case, it shows the secondary school zones, so you can see the elementaries and where how the secondary lines follow. So if you have any questions about the maps, you'll get really familiar with maps as the process matures. Same thing, middle and high school. We have maps of elementary, middle, and high school, as well as large plot maps here, and these will all be posted online as well. There's since the county is so big, what we've done is we've taken the individual school maps and created a map for every single school, so you could see the school boundary. This is Antioch, and this is the school zone for Antioch. It's the light purple here. And within it shows the planning block ID numbers and the number of students that live in each planning block. So this planning block 166 that the school is in right now has 242 K through 5th graders living in it. And this planning block 160 in this community right here has 16 K through 5th graders living in it. So that's something that you can reference. And you'll notice that as you communicate to me, or as you communicate with the committee, and the public will do this the same, is they will start to identify with the planning block numbers and say, I live in planning block 164, and I want to provide this feedback. And that helps the committee and also myself hone in on the small area that they're talking about, so that we can get right to the area that they're focused on. There's also some statistics with each school that shows the number enrolled, number of students that actually physically live outside of the school district, the county. There are some students that, for instance, they may have a P.O. box address and that cannot be matched. So we do have a small number of students that are unmatched in the county, and that's what that means. Total live-in shows the number of K through 5th graders that live inside the zone. And that's really going to be our focus as we start to look at options. We're focused on developing, looking at the number of students that live inside each zone and developing options that balance the live-in rates. And this gives you a little bit idea of mobility, how many students live and attend in the zone, how many students live out and attend in, and how many live in and attend out. And this aligns back with that matrix that I was just talking about, but this just provides it in more of a summary form for each school. We've also created an online map for you for you and the public as the process matures. We'll be adding to this map, and I'm going to just give you a little preview of this map here real quick. So this is croppermap.com/Union County, and this is basically a map that it's an interactive map that you can zoom in on an area. You'll just like Google, if you do your mouse wheel, you can zoom in on an area. And as you zoom in, more detail starts to show up. So you start to see more road names. And we have it built right now where you can see sort of through the boundaries and see what's on an aerial photo. But as you start to get closer, the parcels start to show up and start to see the property lines and other information about the community. And you'll notice that the boundaries that we have, the boundaries that you have right now, align with the properties, so that boundaries aren't cutting through properties. Over here on the left, there are, you can look at drop downs to look at different layers. So this lets you look at the, if you hit the plus sign by planning blocks, you could turn on the planning blocks and say, for instance, I want to look at the planning block labels to see the, what the labels are, what the planning block IDs are here. If you want to look at the K through 5th graders, you can look at the number of K through 5th grade counts. I turn off the planning block labels maybe. And you can see, okay, 139 K through 5th graders live in here. You could turn on, you know, any other layer, 6 through 8, 89 6th through 8th graders live here in this entire planning block. And so that lets you really look at the planning block data and zoom in on information. You can come out a little bit. You can turn on the middle school zones and see what the middle school boundaries look like, as well as the high schools. And you can click, if you're not sure, you can click on anywhere on the map and it'll tell you what the elementary, middle, and high school zone is for that particular area. And these are, it selects the planning blocks right now, and that'll actually take you to the school, the individual school web page. You could also type in an address. If you wanted to look at a specific address and where I go to school, you could type that in there and it'll pull up the same information. It'll zoom to the area and tell you where that address is zoned to, if it does actually find it. There's other things in here. You can zoom to current attendance zones. So I could look, say I want to go to Antioch, and I can zoom to Antioch, or you could zoom to any particular school if you want to get to it quickly across the county or something like that, and look at the actual school zones. You can look at the legend. It shows you what's being displayed. And then you can also print a map. So you could say, my map, or say, for instance, you've got an idea, you got something, an area that you're considering or interested in. You can hit print, and it'll create a print for it. And then you can actually save that as a PDF and email it to people if you'd like. So as we start to develop options, you'll see that where we have the elementary, middle, and high school zones, there will be more options. Options will start to pop up there. So you could turn on current zones, and you can turn on option 1, 2, 3, or start to evaluate the options.
So you guys have a lot of great data, and I think it's going to be really interesting as we go through that to look at it. And one of the things that we've heard, you know, and I live in a very kind of dense area. We're a very small area for transportation, but I know you've got some larger areas, Marshville being a much larger area, and elementary school kids and so forth. Is there a transportation overlay and a time frame? And because I know that's one of the considerations we're looking at. Is that calculated somewhere within the data that we can take into consideration as we're looking at these different populations in the blocks as well?
When you say transportation overlay, what do you have in mind?
Time frame from transportation or travel time to those schools from those planning blocks. From those
particular areas?
Yeah.
We don't have anything that that calculates the time, but I will look into it and see if maybe we could create a tool on there that measures distance between, lets you track distance between areas. We don't have anything like that right now. A lot of it is using your local knowledge of, okay, this is an area and these are the roads that I would travel to get to this school from this location. And that's really some of the benefit of you all as committee members in knowing what traffic is like at 5 o'clock at night, and where there's bad traffic at a certain time and where you want to avoid, and maybe this isn't a good route to go, but you would go over this route. That kind of information is something that really you help bring to the table and help bolster that. But I will look at some to see if there's anything that we could do to calculate some distances and things like that, comparisons. We could go back to the PowerPoint. One last thing about this is that interactive map is, you could pull it up on your phone, on an iPad. It works on any Mac device. It's I was in a meeting yesterday, and people were talking about something and about the school, a particular school zone or a school, and I pulled it right up on my phone to see where the school is and to get a little more detail about it. So it's very useful and a very usable tool to help facilitate this process. So, do anybody have any questions at this point before I continue? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm brand new at this, and I just moved into the area a couple years ago, so I don't know as much about the history of the previous redistricting. But how often do counties redistrict?
You know, it really depends on the nature of the area and what's going on within the county. It can be if in an area that's undergoing a lot of change. For instance, in my school district that I live in, I'm from Ohio, they're redistricting every other year, and there's a lot. So there's a lot of students are impacted, communities are impacted. There being some kids that my kids know have gone to 3 or 4 different they went to 3 or 4 different elementary schools. Not to say that that's ideal, something you want to avoid, but I'd say on average it's everywhere from in an area that's not changing a lot, they can hold 10 years or more. In an area that's undergoing a lot of change, like Union County, it can be, in 5 years, you have to reevaluate things. And with the bypass coming in and some of the impacted charters and things like that, not to mention things that are happening at the state level in the state with House Bill 13 is lowering class size guidelines for schools, and that's going to impact capacity at schools. So that's something that also is driving the need to evaluate this. So it really depends on the area. Where did you come from?
I've been in several different school districts, from Connecticut to Georgia to Virginia, to
Okay.
Henrico County, actually.
Henrico?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was just asking because moving my girls around, I haven't ever experienced redistricting before.
Okay. Yeah, it is something that it's not something that anybody likes to do, and I'm not sure why I do this for a living, but it's something that that I've fallen into, but it's something that's necessary when the need arises. But I think the ultimate goal is try to minimize the need to do this as little as possible. And that's why we're focused on looking at all these factors and not only looking at current but future to try to be proactive so that they can hold as long as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How do you factor in the 45 bypass? And I'm from the Forest Hills District, and it's actually dumping off right at Forest Hills High School on the Highway 74. And I noticed you work with Brunswick County, and Brunswick County is one of the fastest growing counties in the East Coast. And how do you deal with growth that you are not sure how it's going to impact the area?
Well, we have some of the best people in the business doing our demographic studies and forecasting. Dr. McKibben has, we've been working and studying the bypass. When you look at that interactive map, and I believe it's on most maps that we have generated, that bypass is on there so that we can see where the bypass is going. We've been tracking where they're planning on putting utilities into those to see how that's going to spawn any future residential development and growth, and being in contact with the county and really having a good relationship with the county to understand what's planned and what's in the pipeline for development. And then it's our job to understand how that's going to impact enrollment. And that's our demographers are really on top of that and understanding and tracking how that's going to impact each school district or each attendance area. Yes, sir.
I see total enrollment, but I don't see school capacity. So it's hard to take what I see here and have a perspective on what the capacity is for the schools versus that.
Yes, sir. You're right. There is no capacity data in your binders right now. The school capacity, we did a capacity study over the summer, and we are just finalizing that. And I walked through every single school building and met with every principal in the district. And I am finalizing those capacity numbers, and those capacity numbers will be shared with you at the next meeting. So you'll be able to, what I encourage you to do is study. There's a lot of information in that binder between this and next meeting study that, just look over the materials and get familiarized with the planning blocks and the data. And then as capacity data starts to come on, you'll layer that information on and start to relate the information together.
One other question, and it may be more for the existing BOE, but I don't know if we have any background or if we're working completely off the assumption that we're working within the defined schools as they exist today, or if there are any concrete plans for additional school locations amongst elementary, middle, or high over the next 4 to 5 years that may have a part in this as we think longer term as well.
Right. Our objectives are to account for the planned additions. So there are additions that are planned, but that take us out to 2019-20. But there's nothing else that is factored into what we're looking at in terms of new school being built here or there. If it were something that was in the pipeline and within this time frame, it would certainly be part of what we're looking at. Yes, ma'am.
With additions, do you mean portables, mobile classrooms coming in?
No, they are actually building bricks and mortar and additional full classrooms with as a permanent addition to the schools. So some of them are getting 15 classrooms, some of them are getting 4, and those are going to be actual bricks and mortar additional permanent space.
As a follow-up to that, I think it's a really good question about the portable space and additional. How is that calculated in terms of the capacity study that you're doing? And is there a number that we cannot exceed given portables, or we're trying to do it without portable space in the calculation at all at this point?
Absolutely. It's a good question. Portables, when we calculate our capacity data, portables are not factored into the capacity of a school. Those are essentially intended to be temporary spaces and not something that we want to plan for the future. So the goal is to try to not have as few portables in use as possible and get students inside the buildings as much as we can. So we don't calculate portables in the capacity, and I'll share some of that information with you when we unveil the capacity data, and you'll see that some buildings. There are portables all over the county, but we're really focused on the permanent structure and not portable capacity. So at the next meeting, we're going to be presenting you with what we call baseline options. So myself and Dr. McKibben and Dr. Faust are going to be meeting in the next week or two to really start to look at creating a couple of options to bring back to you and get your gut reactions to. And really it's a starting point to help hit the ground running so you can understand what a couple of options could look like. It's not to say that you have to pick one or the other. Really the focus is so that you can react to it and help to drive some your thoughts on how it may look better, how it could improve. So once we bring these options to you, you can take those and modify them and expand on them or make them better. We can scrap them scrap one if we need to, or you can build one from scratch and kind of give us some input on an option that you are considering for a school or the whole district. It's really just a starting point to start the discussion and to help you really kickstart the brain into looking at what a boundary could look like and what the numbers would be that represent a particular zone option. Public engagement and committee work is really pivotal to this process, and I think I've stated it pretty clearly that we really enable open transparency here and try to make sure that that it's clear that nothing has been decided. There is no secret plan that we're just trying to do this as a placeholder and then implement a full plan. This is something that's going to be built by the committee and by the public as they continue to provide feedback and information. So we have an 18-person committee that are you guys and working with us through this process. The committee was selected based off of objectivity, trying to make sure that you're focused on the big picture here, what's best for all kids and not just your children or your neighborhood. Making sure that we have people and representatives on this committee from all over the county so that we can hear what's happening up in the northeast part of the county and also what's happening in the southwest part of the county, and you can all share. And I'm sure that everybody is going to learn from each other as this process matures. Ability to attend the meetings per project schedule is important, and I think we had about 88 or so applicants, or over 85 applicants for this purpose, and we couldn't. The school district couldn't select everybody, and there were a lot of qualified people. But we're really happy that you're here to help us out in this endeavor. We've got the timeline here, which I have noted on page 4, and you could see that we've got a series of meetings. Public information session was last night. We are here on the June 28th, the first meeting, and really the focus of these first 4 meetings, it's not to try to solve the problem and try to create the best plan that we think is the best thing for this district. The focus of these first 4 meetings is to generate a series of options, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 options that you can take to the public so that you let the public react to and give us feedback on, which is this public input session number 1. And at this time in September, we'll have some options to share with them, and we're going to solicit some feedback from the public and have them fill out a survey and help to give us input on those options to see if there's anything that we can do in terms of modifying options that bring us closer to our objectives. We'll be taking that public feedback, and I will summarize it into a report for you, and coming back for another 3 meetings, continuing options development, and then getting into the public input session number 2. This is when we go back to the public again and say, okay, we've gone back to the table, looked at other things, and continue to evaluate options, and here we are with a modified set of options for their consideration. At this point, maybe if we take 4 to this one, maybe we can narrow it down to a couple, 2 or 3. It really depends on how things evolve in this county. And then we will do one final meeting after that to look at the final public input and finalize the recommendations for the school board, which will be presented in February, and the school board will take action sometime in either March or April of 2018. A little bit about communication logistics is the committee member names will be made public, but we're not going to release personal information of the members. We want to make sure that we protect your privacy as much as possible. These processes can get heated, and we just want to make sure that nobody comes banging on your door asking you why you made this option or something. But any emails that you do send, you can send them to me, and I will make sure that the rest of the group receives it. If there's anything that you want to share with the committee in between meetings, you can email them to me, and I'll make sure that they get to the entire committee as a whole. All emails will be copied to the school district, and just remember that all communications are public record. So just be careful what you send out in email, because it could very well be on the front page of the news. So just be mindful that any email that you send is going to be is subject to being public information and public record. Any questions you have from the public as you're working through in the meantime in between meetings, feel free to send them to myself and or the school district, and we'll make sure that that we help answer the question. Most important thing is don't speculate and don't assume anything. There is a web page dedicated to this process. If you go to the school district web page, you'll notice the Student Realignment Citizens Advisory Committee link on the right. And this is going to be the repository for all the information. So the PowerPoint that we gave last night is going to be posted up there. All of this information that we've handed to you today, including the plot maps and the interactive map, will be posted online, as well as the live stream. So all this information is going to be posted so that the public can follow the process and understand the work of the committee that's going on. And remember to refer to your background report. And some contact information in the back here. Oh, the contact information. I think it okay. It's contact info. Go back. This is my contact info. This will be posted online. The PowerPoint will be posted there, but you could take note of contact information if you'd like here, so that because we don't have a copy of the PowerPoint for you in your packets right now. Yes, ma'am.
I've just kind of browsed over this briefly and I see all the maps, but during the last redistricting, there was a list that came out as far as mileage goes, like the kids that are traveling the furthest to school. And it kind of goes along with the transportation question that he asked. But I think for all of us, it would be nice to see the neighborhoods that are traveling the furthest to school and how to, fix those situations.
Okay.
Because I know there's kids that are on the bus for 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes every day each way. So like I know about my side of the county, but I'm not as familiar with the other side. So it would be nice to see, looking at these maps, it may look close to this school, but it might really be 12 miles from that school.
Okay.
So it might be nice to see the mileage layout and the neighborhoods that are traveling the furthest and how to fix those.
Okay. I will. I'll take note of that, and we'll look at putting some materials together that give you an idea of the distance to school, and I'll talk with the school district to see what they had done in the past and see if we can. Yeah. And the distance to school per neighborhood. Yeah, that's something that we could do. I think that the neighborhood can be very large, but we could at least maybe find the center of the neighborhood and the average the distance from the center of the neighborhood to the school or something like that. Okay.
Well, I think, I'm sorry. I think the school system, at least when we moved into our neighborhood, we were given kind of a time frame. Okay, your bus will be here then. That data should be, I would assume, shareable. And maybe we could look at that. And that way you're breaking down, okay, the first stop for this bus is X, and the school bell schedule starts at Y. So if they're picking up at 6:30 for a 7:30 bell schedule, that may be something you want to take a look at. So
yeah, I will talk with the school district about their transportation schedules and see if that's something that that we could put together in a packet for you to share with you, at least for the current boundaries, so you can understand what they are, and we'll sort it in a way that's easily, so that you can analyze it pretty easily. No problem. Okay, one of the things that's 7 o'clock. I think we'll see how much longer we have to go. One of the things we like to do when we start committee work is a SWOT analysis. Have any of you done a SWOT analysis? A SWOT is basically stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and it's really a brainstorming exercise that allows you to fully just think out of the box on what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are for this process and for as it relates to student realignment. So what we'd like you to do is we're going to have you break into 3 groups, and we're going to have you do a SWOT analysis and probably spend 5 or 10 minutes on it, and just do a SWOT as it relates to what should the Citizens Advisory Committee consider as it develops student realignment options for the Union County Public Schools. We just have some flip charts here, but they're just blank flip charts. Some committee members will create the grid and do the SWOT and brainstorm them here. Some of them decide to put one for strengths and one separate one for each one. And if we can, when we break into our groups, we have one person be the recorder, and then you guys can just can work through it as a brainstorming exercise within the 3 groups. Do you guys have any questions about that? This is really helpful because it helps really helps me and helps the committee realize what things are being considered and what are some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of as it relates to this process. So we won't spend too too much time on this, but I think it's something that we should certainly do. So here, I'll just do numbers here so we can randomize it. Group 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You guys got it? All right, and so here's an easel. If you guys want to just break into your 3 groups, and you guys, I have some Sharpies and flip charts, and we'll spend about maybe 15 minutes on this, 10 minutes, and then we'll have a discussion and share out the results of the SWOT as a whole. Let's see. Here's, you want to take an easel and a. Oh, you're in the Route 1 group. Okay, you're in a 3 group. I'll give you the easel and flip chart. And there's one more easel there for you, and you can spread out. Yeah, you guys can feel free to find your spot. Who needs a flip chart? Somebody? Okay, here you go. You can take these. And here are a couple of pen markers for you guys. Sure thing. Here's a couple markers.
Thank you.
And here's some markers for you guys. Sure thing.
That's Gary.
Turn this light on for him. And also remember that a strength could also be an opportunity, or a weakness could be a threat, or a strength could be a weakness. And so you can always, they could be in a couple of different sections possibly. Okay, thanks. I am, okay. What do we say, about 5 minutes, do you think is okay? Okay, about 5 minutes, and we'll regroup. About ready to report to the group as a whole. Why don't we start with this group back in the corner here with the green group. Yes, sir, you're on.
Greetings, everyone. We are the mighty Group 2. And what we concentrated on as far as our, I'll go like that. Our threats, we looked at threats as new developments, the unknownness from new developments, what they may bring to the situation. We looked at lack of stability, disrupting communities as a threat, reopening old hard feelings, just the idea of redistricting getting put out there again. What will that do to the mindset of those that experienced it before? And public dismay, we looked at as a threat. Weaknesses we looked at is transportation, length of time for busing, disruption of the students. Another weakness, and I thought this was really good when one of our team thought of it, the lack of new schools. With all of the growth, maybe new schools could help ease some of the stuff by spreading some stuff out, especially in those anticipated areas where housing and age of buildings. Opportunities we looked at as the repair current issues. This process will allow the school system to repair some of the things that weren't right the last time. Now we have a great opportunity to get it right this time. And then we have rebuild, and that would lead into rebuilding of trust. Opportunities for Union County Public Schools is a great education, and we want to erase the stigma from some of the school clusters that people have. They're just stigmas. They're not true. They're stigmas, and we want to erase that, and we see this as a great opportunity to do that. And finally, our strengths. Neighborhood schools. We really love that. Keeping families together, save money because the families are closer together. Safety is a strength. We believe that Union County Public Schools really hits the safety piece. And we really believe that they share information and are transparent. This process even will highlight some of that. And our last strength was the new board is in line with the community as it relates to that number one piece of neighborhood schools. That's our report.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you guys want to go next?
Okay, I liked your negative to positive, so I ended on a positive note. So for our threats, what we thought of was a communication and the speculation that can arise with people in the public and miscommunications that can occur as definitely being a threat. Stability versus change. So those who have already made the change 3 years ago, whether or not they're really going to want to move because they've been there for a while, and whether people who moved to those areas and thought that that was going to be their school district, whether they're going to want to change after just having moved there, and just a mix of those two. And then potentially doesn't execute or improve things, that we go through all this process and everything and nothing changes and everybody's disgruntled and still unhappy. Weaknesses, the current weakness, we felt the top thing was the transportation issues that people are experiencing. And then the student imbalance right now, capacity, we need to know what the capacities of the schools are, and some of them if they're at capacity, and versus the attendance. Our own biases as a next weakness, the inability to remain impartial, that we are all vested in our communities and that we will try to be impartial, but as being human beings, that's challenging at times. And the projections, that you're only as good as your data. So if the projections, for whatever reason, aren't exactly what occur, then obviously we could not do the right thing. So the strengths that we see are improving the bus efficiency. This process being transparent and open and accessing, and the public accessing the information, we think is really key and is a good strength. Balancing the student-teacher ratio, because in those schools where they're already at capacity and they have a large number of kids, making it more manageable for teachers to instruct their students. And community input, basically doing what we're all doing and then helping to educate the people in our area. And in opportunities, definitely helping with transportation, as was the weakness there. A property value was a discussion about basically that with your schools and when you purchase a home, whether or not you're going to go to that school or not, if you find changes, whether or not that's going to lead people to go to private schools, or whether that's going to leave them to want to sell their house, things like that. And educating the public is obviously an opportunity, and sharing our own experiences so we can learn from one another is another opportunity.
Great, some good stuff. What you guys? Oh, let's get you a microphone here. Sorry.
One of the struggles in doing this was, depending on what your perspective was, many of them could be placed in strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As you know, many of you were struggling with the same thing. But as a threat, change can be good, but a lot of people are scared of change at the same time. What effect are charter schools going to have in the redistricting? Are there going to be new charter schools or not? And if so, where are the locations, and how does that affect the future realignment? Future legislation, you guys, I'm sure, have a better grip and a hand on that than I do, but how does that affect the realignment? Of course, the bypass, and what areas are most affected, and if so, how do we forecast that future growth in those areas that are affected? The sports and extracurricular activities, we actually put that on all four. Depending on the schools, there's a big amount of pride and support in each school, and support is something that if we do not have the support of the community in those areas, in those schools, we all struggle. And if we can get to where we can maybe not love everything, but agree to disagree, I think we can go many places further and faster. Opportunities, consolidating, buses, stability, and I know many of you have already addressed a lot of these things. The magnet choices and the STEAM. I didn't really understand the STEAM as the choices of the different schools. Was that okay? The weaknesses here again, the buses, the private schools. What effect did the private schools around have on the public schools? And if we make these realignments, does that mean more people go to private schools, or are there new private schools coming in or not? Again, the weakness of the bypass, how does that affect? And then the sports and extracurricular activities, the strength. Again, the change, that can be a strength or a weakness. The consolidating, the safety of the different areas, sports extracurricular activity, and also the equality, the equal distribution. How do you measure that, and what is best for each one of the schools?
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate all you guys doing this. I'm going to take these back, and I'm going to put them into a summary document. I'm going to study them even further, and I'll give these back to you as a little summary document at the next committee meeting. While we are in our groups, if we can go to the next slide, there's another task that I'd like to accomplish tonight. And I know that we're going a little bit over. I may have been a little long-winded in my opening presentation, but I think it's important for us to give you the ability tonight to review these planning blocks. And really what I'd like to do is, since we have our three groups, I'd like to have you guys can stay in the same group, and that on that back table there are three maps, and I'd like to have you find a spot at a table. You can move chairs and slide microphones aside if you'd like, and really lay the plot map out, and just take a first glance and look at the planning block data, and just kind of get a feel for it and see if there are any initial concerns or thoughts about the planning blocks. It's really your first time ever seeing these, and so I'd really like you just to kind of get oriented and just get your gut reaction for starters on how the planning blocks look, or if you have any thoughts on if they could be adjusted in the currently. Yes, let's get a microphone here for Dr. McKibben there.
Let's see. Thank you, Matthew. And one thing I want to add to the planning block that ties into what you're talking about, sir, is as Matt said, when you have the joy of GIS, he's showing here the number of students living in an area, the elementary, the middle, the high school. There are other layers: census data, age structure, households with kids. There's a whole bunch of demographic data in there. So when we're sitting down trying to draw the map, first thing is it works now. How's it going to work in the future? Future development, aging patterns, empty nesting, houses going on the market. You ever watch Zillow data or type it up on there? It's at parcel level. You can overlay that on there too, okay? And this is kind of reinforce the fact that the definition of these planning blocks are very, very important because we're thinking about making a modification. This is the denomination we're going to use, okay, one of these planning blocks. So if it's too big, it's too small, it should be combined together, particularly in the neighborhood aspect of it. You know, we don't want to split a neighborhood, particularly with friends and neighbors and all that. You don't want to make them too big. You only possibly make them too small. But the more input we have for people who actually live in these communities and work and drive and interact on a day-to-day basis, that's just invaluable information. No matter how well we do our field research and scout, we can't pick that up. We need that from you. So your input and suggestions, and we'll actually listen to them too, you know, it will incorporate, it'll help make this process good because our goal is to not only have boundaries of work in 2018, we want these also working in 2025 and 26. So you don't have to go through this every 3 years or so. So again, this input you have on this is critically important. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. McKibben. That is important. And there are, to add to his comments, we have reference materials here in the middle that if you want to go look, there's aerial imagery so you can see what it looks like on the ground. And there's also a subdivision map there, the second to the last. And then the final map at the end shows residential property, agricultural, commercial property. So you can kind of get a feel for how the county is laid out in terms of zoning. You guys have any questions about that? Just brainstorming and marking up the map. Feel free. You guys have markers, and we have more markers over here if you'd like. But you could go ahead and just find a spot. If you want to take a corner, we can move microphones around. There's 3 copies of maps over here that we can each group can have. And feel free to mark up on the map liberally. Any notes you have, feel free to write them directly on there. And just make yourself at home and Am I on? We say about 5 more minutes, and then we can just maybe we could share some thoughts to the group, and then we'll let you guys go home tonight. So about 5 more minutes. Okay, guys. You guys are having a great conversations around the maps. I think it's really fruitful to hear some of the things that you're discussing and talking about. I am encouraged by it. Maybe, but it is 7:45. Maybe what we can do is we can have, even if you didn't mark up anything on the maps, we can okay, good. Then we'll get some of your perspectives and some of your thoughts from an initial look at it. Let me find the microphone. Thank you, sir. So we'll start with this group over here. If you guys want to share your some of your initial thoughts, and even if there's nothing marked on the map, you can just tell us some of your conversations, anything that's key that you'd like. Jerry.
Okay, looking at ours, I went to my own neighborhood and looked there and saw that we're grouped with the neighborhood beside us, which is 4 times the size of ours. So looking at individual neighborhoods instead of grouping together, you know, when our entrance is on Airport Road and their entrance is 3 or 4 miles away on 84, we definitely started looking at like people crossing main roads, crossing 74. And then even this has been such a great tool to look at and see the density and how, you know, we all knew that that side of the county is way more populated, but then how do you make sure that, you know, Forest Hills has utilized classrooms and seats when their population isn't so populated. So that's what we were looking at with our group.
So you did have, you do have a couple of notes on there. That I see one area with the line in the center there. I think it's in the Rocky River. So that's an area that you have identified as an area that could be split. I think you had told me the subdivisions have different accesses off of different roads off the other ends. So that's an adjustment. That's a perfect example of something to make to try to make it more refined. And what is the note on top there on the northern part? What is that? Okay. Major highway. Kids crossing major highway there. Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. You want to pass the mic over here and.
Well, if we're looking at it for the first time, it's a lot to look at all at once. But there's just a lot of call outs. I think some of the observations about major roads and dividing neighborhoods, we were just looking for obvious call outs and distances and trying to understand why we have three different clusters. This area right here servicing 3 different schools. So just trying to look at some of the outliers. Just looking at a high school over here, Forest Hill High School over here, for a neighborhood here that has a high school that's, you know, is it a couple miles? But it's just going to take a lot more time and context to really understand what's going on, and understand just because this looks large, travel time's may not be that long. Again, looking at some of the bypass issues and trying to understand how that all affects things. But,
I think one of the things that we did see were some of the elementary schools that are currently crossing 74 to get to their school district, where it seems like they might be better absorbed by the district on that side of 74, because anybody that's crossed 74 and Indian Trail knows that those lights take forever. So.
Right. Yes, and it's a very congested roadway there.
But we mentioned a little bit ago having mileage between homes and schools. I think better minutes, because what takes 15 miles in our side on Forest Hills, 10, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. On the Indian Trail, that could take 30 minutes. So I think that would be a better time issue.
Okay, and it's really good. It's good to hearing the conversations. Not only are you looking at planning blocks, but you may as a committee not have even evaluated all of the boundaries in the county. So this is a good opportunity for you not only to look at the small area planning block levels, but how the current boundaries are configured and to understand where they're crossing over. So it's all really good observations. And as you know, you get to the south and the east and the northeast of the county, it starts to get more rural and less house, less density certainly than on the west end. And you can see how that relates to the planning blocks. The planning blocks are larger on the east, and so are the actual geographic areas of the feeder zones. But certainly really good observations and things to build on.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Did you say on some of the overlay the charter schools would be on one of the overlays for the maps and stuff? Locations of them?
We don't have a map of charter schools, but it's something that we can certainly create for you as an overlay or a map so that you can understand where the charter schools are located in the county, certainly.
Only one that got there free. I knew there was only one that goes to high school, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess we'd need to know if there's only one that goes all the way to high school, then that means that those charter schools have to feed into a middle school and into a different high school, a public one.
Most of the charters are K-8 systems typically, okay. And so most of them do, as you've indicated, do travel to the high schools eventually, except with the exception of the one that's a K-12. But we'll give you some more detail on charter school locations just for your information.
Thank you.
All right. If we could pass the mic over here, did you guys have any thoughts or comments, even if you didn't mark any observations or discussions that you want to share?
Yeah, I think that like the last group, there's just a lot of information and a lot of us are familiar with our little piece of it and not the whole thing. So there's some areas, I live in a very densely in the western population there that's very densely populated, and there's multiple schools that really within driving distance that you could go to versus somewhere out in Marshville or somewhere in the southern part of the county where it looks geographically very large, but like I said, that may not be a traffic issue for us. You've got a lot of 2-lane country roads and heavy population, and traffic is a serious concern. So it may take you a half an hour just to get to school and you're going 3 miles. So, there's a lot of that, concern for that side, on our side of the county. And so I think a lot of it's just trying to figure out, why were some of the decisions made last time, especially along some of the major corridors. You guys mentioned 74, 16, and 84 on our side of the county are big concerns. There's a lot of road improvements on the pike the next 4 to 5 years for those areas as well. What impact is that going to have? Obviously, road construction is never good when it comes to schools. Hopefully they get it done quickly and efficiently, but it's certainly going to have some impacts. There were some neighborhoods that were split last time, and so trying to understand those decisions and trying to make sure we understand what the longevity of it. You mentioned charter schools. There are really only one major charter school right now, but the last redistricting and the change in legislation with charter schools access and ability to open in North Carolina has really accelerated some of that. And so looking at what future plans or maybe even take into consideration applications for charter schools with what's out there in the pipe. So we'll know, where those schools are going to be going, because I think they see this area and they're watching what Union County is doing. And I think and they've certainly identified some opportunities for that, which we don't want that to have a negative impact on some of the schools that we're trying to protect and have some of those schools fall even further behind. So we want to make sure that that we're doing what we can to kind of help all of those schools across the county.
Yes, sir. Very good observations, and I have noted for the charter school piece, I'll try to see if we can get some information on the enrollment and the capacity of those to see what they're at, and then also maybe look into because I've been. When I was driving around the schools, I do recall on the west end, you're in an area that looks like it's a rural area, but there's a traffic line that's like a half a mile long. You're wondering where is all this coming from? But and so I will take note and see if we can there's any information on planned future road improvements, so that maybe we can get an idea on if they're expanding roads, some of those rural roads, or if there's anything in the pipeline, maybe see what we can find with that to help facilitate your decision making. Do you guys have anything else to share?
Just the only question I have is there a list of how many lots or land and approved in the county that would go in those growth areas? There's certain areas there's a lot, and then there's certain areas like ours that are not. But that would definitely factor in.
Okay. Yes. So the question was to get an idea of the list of planned and approved units, and I'll look into that and see what we can. We have the list of planned and approved units, so we have that. We'll supplement that in your packet and provide some information on that in anticipation for the next meeting as well. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure.
Is there any way to get some context as we go forward as to some of the decisions that were made in the past? Because we can look at these maps and we can see what was, but there may have been some good reasons why they did that. Now, I don't necessarily think that we need to always take that into consideration, but it would be helpful to kind of get an idea of what drove some of the past decisions.
We haven't, I don't think anybody left us. Yeah, I think they're a little lost.
Well, I think that there's, that was something that when we first started working on this, we weren't sure what the objectives were before talking with the district and things like that when the very early stages. And we had thought about, okay, do we look at what previously used to look like versus currently? But really what we landed on is that these are the boundaries that are feeding your schools right now. And we'll be giving you some data on utilization and capacity of the current boundaries. And some of the things that were done in the past may have been negative. Some of them may have been positive in actually trying to balance utilization. So what I would encourage you to do is focus on the current with what we have on the current boundaries. Not be too focused on the past, but try to really look at building options that meet the overall objectives and adhere to the criteria that we have for this process, because this is a fresh look, a fresh start, and a lot of things have changed since then.
Look at this as we're just starting from scratch. When they were doing this 3 years ago, and once again, we had nothing to do with it. But since then, 3 years ago, the bypass is still in the hopeful stages. Okay? So the bypass is still in the hopeful stages. There were no new charter schools. 2 came online last year. Okay, so had that impact. And the third, the most important one, you'll hear this time and time again through this process, no one even heard about House Bill 13, which has been a real game changer for your facility. So those are 3 very, very major and macro trends that are now different from what it was 3 years ago. So you really are looking at a whole new different ballgame. Throw in the economic, the demographic changes, the road changes and all that. There really is a new, fresh look now. And there's a lot of other school districts throughout North Carolina that are sitting down right now going, what are we going to do to deal with House Bill 13? Okay, this just happens to coincide with some other issues in Union County. This is not a factor that's just affecting only you guys. So I mentioned Brunswick, we're working on Brunswick right now, trying to grapple with how we're going to deal with the impact of House Bill 13. So there's a lot of differences here. So you really should be starting from scratch at this point.
Yeah, a lot of factors like Dr. McKibben said with the state legislation and then other changes that have happened since then. It really does warrant a fresh look at the boundaries from a fresh perspective with a community-based group to see what we can do. Try to minimize the amount of shifts that occur, but not focus on the objective here isn't to undo or revert back to prior boundaries that were there before the redistricting that occurred a few years ago. It's really just trying to focus on what you're dealing with now in terms of building utilization and the criteria and objectives that we have in front of us for this process. Yes. Okay.
It just came up in our group. Is there an actual study or anything done about what an appropriate bus time for a child being on a bus would be? It varies, but from district to district because of the nature, the size of the district, some versus city and
urban versus rural. But what I will talk with the district about bus times and what the average bus time is, and give you some information, a little more information on what the bus times are, the minimums and maximums and things like that.
Sorry, I meant for the welfare of the child. Has anybody ever done a study of something like a bus time of an hour actually impacts their school performance?
Not that I know of.
Out there in the education journals, it's inconclusive. They have studies out there that show that anything more than 20 minutes, they're doing work at McDonald's. Anything more than an hour, go to Princeton. It's really not a correlation to it. It's a factor, but the statistical term, the explained variance is so small. Now, outside the start times, what's available for the program school. Someone made a great point there. What might be an hour ride in one part of the county, is 5 miles. Another one might be 25 miles. On a personal example, I spent an hour on the bus going to school when I was a kid. Look how I turned out. All right, maybe that wasn't the best example to use, okay? But, there's studies out there, but they go both ways on it because there's so many other intervening variables in there that you really can't isolate bus time as a single variable that's going to affect student performance.
I think at that point, bus ride would be, the length of the bus ride would be more affected by parents and involvement. How your kids come home, do they immediately jump on their homework, that kind of thing? Do they do their homework on the bus? Do they just not do homework at all? So I think that really would have some more to do with parental involvement.
And when it's all said and done, really our focus is to try to, I don't think any parent in the world wants their student to spend any more time on a bus. So whatever we can do to try to minimize the amount of time children spend on the bus is really the best approach while we adhere to the other criteria. I think that there are going to be instances where there may be instances where somebody may be closer to a school, but they can't go to that school because there's a neighborhood around it that has enough students to fill the building. So we'll have to be mindful of all these different factors as we create options, but try to minimize the bus time.
And real quick example from the Midwest, we were working in a district up there, and we were drawing some boundaries, and this was out in Illinois, and we were kind of concerned because the kids were going to be on the school bus for an hour, but we'll get some pushback from the parents. But in this particular case, it actually saw it as a good thing because they may have been on a bus for an hour, but the kids were getting home right about the time the parents get back from work. So in that particular situation, it was a positive. Now, you wouldn't want to generalize that to other districts because it was a unique situation. But again, it's why you don't want to focus on one singular variable. There's never a magic bullet variable to solve everything. But all of them in toto added up, then they can be effective. You mentioned some of them also.
Well, I have a daughter who loves to ride the bus. I couldn't get her to stop riding the bus if I tried, and her ride is roughly about an hour.
Yeah, and I think that in a county of this size, you probably will have, it's unavoidable to probably have some bus routes that are an hour long, given the size and the geographic size of this county. Does anybody else want to make any comments before we let you guys go home? Well, hey, I want to thank you all for helping us and kicking this process off. We're going to be back in a month on Wednesday, July 26th. In the meantime, I would just encourage you to keep studying up on the materials. We'll be posting this information up online. All the materials will be posted online for the public's benefit, so you can encourage your neighbors and community and people that you know about what's going on, and encourage them that they're welcome to come observe and follow the process or follow it from home. And just thanks again, and we'll see you in about a month, and to keep moving ahead. Okay. Wednesday, July 26th, 6 p.m. here at the same place. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night.